Hello and welcome everybody to our today's Just Planet webinar. Today I'm going to present to you the new functionality that we just recently published with the sprint of April. Mainly we were focusing on task connection functionality, but we also provide some other useful functionality I'm going to show you in a minute. But before we start off, let me quickly point out that this is a GoToWebinar, and as you guys might know from other webinars, all attendees are automatically muted. That is due to optimizing the quality of audio. However, if you have any question, please do not hesitate to ask either via the chat box here or sending an email to me or anyone of our Just Planet team. As always, I guarantee that you will get an answer to your question. So we are happy to receive your questions accordingly. Then let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Elmar Karlovic. I'm Managing Director and co-owner of Netronic Software, which is the German-based company that provides Just Planet. Okay, but now let's hop into today's agenda. What did we focus on in our April sprint? That we unfortunately published a week later than initially targeted. I really apologize for that, but I'm 100% sure that with the functionality we are showing up here, we significantly enhanced the overall functionality, and I'm also sure that this enhancement you will benefit from. So what did we do? On one hand side, we extended the functionality to show KPIs in the job view. And second, we now provide task connection functionality. And what this is all about, I'm going to show you today. Let's start off with the KPIs first. And in that regard, I would quickly give you like a refresher about KPIs that we provide, and in particular, two KPIs that I think are very helpful when it comes to high mix, low volume scheduling. On one hand side, that is the job buffer or total buffer. And this total buffer is defined as the time period between the due date and the scheduled end date of a job. So that's the total distance between scheduled end and due date. So obviously, this is an absolute metric that gives you an idea about the OTD risk of that particular job. As you see how much literally you have got of buffer regarding this job. On the other hand, we also do provide the job buffer level as KPI. And the buffer level is the quotient of total buffer and the total remaining process time. So actually the critical path, and here the required time of usage of your finite resources on the critical path. This in relation is the buffer level. And obviously, as we have a relation here, that is a relative metric, a percentage. And this is now a percentage regarding your job OTD. In my eyes, if you ask me, I prefer the job buffer level, as especially the MRCT, so the critical path, required time of usage of the resources, is a significant information that you must require, because the absolute buffer is just one side of the coin, right? The other coin is how much time do I need to come there? And hence, the smaller the buffer level percentage is, the more a job is threatened to get late in the future. That's very theoretical. Let's have a more graphical approach on this for a better understanding. So let's have an example job here that even has been started, and I've got one finished task. And then after that, I have routing that divides up into two branches that then in the end is, brought together, let's be it in an assembly. So first, Very easy. The total buffer is just the time distance of the scheduled end of the last task in the job routing and the time distance to the due date. That's the total buffer. However, to come to the job buffer level, then we need to see how much time do I need max to come to the scheduled end. And here I need to compare the two branches. As I said, it is a critical path. And here the upper branch with 10 plus 10 plus 15 with 35 hours is a longer one compared to the lower one. So here the what we call the MRCT, the max required remaining cycle time, is 35. So that is the time that you need of finite capacities to complete the job. And if you put that total buffer and the MRCT in a relation, then we have the buffer level. And here that is the 21 hours of time distance in relation to how much I need to come to the end currently. It is 60%. So in Just Planet, 60% of job buffer level is below 1 and it will show up as an orange, so at a higher risk. But of course, the percentage always refers to your use case, and here especially the volatility of your data and how dynamic it is. So the more volatile and the more dynamic, the more I recommend to have a higher buffer level, as the risk that compared to your initial estimation that the operations take longer in reality, this is what the buffer level then shows up with, to tackle this volatility. Okay, does that make sense? So like that was like a refresher of buffer and buffer level, what's it's all about. And now we are coming to where we have extended the JPI functionality to show this KPI. And therefore, I'm switching to my Just Planet account. Whoops, that was the wrong one. Actually, I need to go and open the software. Sorry for that. Going here we go. So that is my Just Planet account here. And here I'm in the job view. And this shows now at the very left here exactly the default as you are used to it. So like we have the color codes for the buffer level, fair enough. And we have a value in that column for those jobs that are delayed. You're aware of that, right? So like currently I have got my setting that says show the delay in days, and here that is now rounded to 1 day of delay. But all the other fields here of the other jobs do not show any values at all. We just show, or before we just have shown delays and nothing else. And this is now extended as we think not only value of delays is of interest, but also values of non-delayed jobs give you information that might help you with your daily scheduling routines, right? And therefore, if you go to the tab settings and click on the wrench icon, you open the general dialog here, then you can see show KPI and table. If it says default, so then it is as you are used to it and as it has been all the years before. But now we have opened this as options, and it says you can choose between the default, or you can also show the buffer, the total job buffer of each job. So if I'm selecting this, so then you will directly see that now the fields are populated and not only the delays are shown here, but it also shows all buffers in positive and negative sense of all jobs, which in my eyes is a pretty helpful information compared to do not having it at all, right? So in the same regard, you can also select the buffer level. And by the way, that is what my favorite is, because I always prefer the relative figure compared to the absolute one. And if you choose this, So then accordingly, this column is populated with a buffer level of jobs. So why do I prefer buffer level? Let's take this example here as a little use case to show what I mean. So like currently, I followed the sequence numbering, so the prioritization of jobs as very many of our customers do, and that is based on the due date. You see here, so like my prioritization 100% following the due date, and that means the nearer the due date, the higher the priority of jobs, right? So that's how I did the prioritization here. But now looking into the buffer levels, so like the risk figure of what is the ratio between time needed and additional time as a buffer. So then you directly see I've got a delayed job, but there is another job that has a very high relation of time needed and buffer. So therefore, you see that it makes more sense that you reprioritize and jump over with a delayed job and change the position with the one that has a high buffer level. And even if I jump over, the buffer level still remains at a very high level. So first of all, this interaction for sure makes sense. So then even the job PO4 here is now showing up with just 40% of buffer level. See here, it's a long time that I still need on machines, and it's most likely if I have a high dynamic environment that there might be some issues, and I don't have much time left, to cope all of this insecurity and the risk. So therefore, in my eyes, sequencing is better if we also use buffer from the PO2, right? So also here, I recommend to have a look on the buffer level, to have a better prioritization of my jobs. And even here, if you look at the bottom down, like these 10 and 11 jobs also might jump over PO8 and 9, even though this is scheduled, to take place in June. But it is just an example here. But also here, comparing like these jobs compared to the buffer level here, it's most likely that we get a better result if we would jump over at least PO8 and 9 with our jobs that are currently orange and yellow. So now if you ask me, compared to the initial scenario, the reprioritization of the jobs based on having a better look on the buffer level shows a way better scenario than my initial one. So, and that is why I prefer having the buffer level in there, as on one hand side, it gives you a good indication of how to make better use of, let me call that, an enhanced sequencing or prioritization of jobs on one hand. On the other hand, I see the buffer level also as an indicator of how you evolve your scheduling over the time. Because if you can achieve, to have lower and lower buffer levels for your job into the future, this is an indicator that you are better able to manage your dynamic and your volatility of data, right? So the better you get in estimation the data, the less buffer you will need. So like the more you are familiar with all these scheduling hurdles and the scheduling challenge, the outcome in the end should be that you are capable, to deal with lower and lower buffer levels when adding a job. And this also answers the next step. Also, when adding a new job, also quantifying the due date, also the buffer level can give an indicator of how risky your due date is that you agree for a new job to your customer. So also here, maybe if you have a like high volatility, maybe it also makes sense to use a buffer level as kind of a minimum hurdle or a minimum value that a job must show up with just to ensure your OTD. But this is just all recommendation. Always the devil is in the detail. It relates to your use case, but I just want to show you some options. And obviously here now you have got extended functionality in the settings, what to see in the table. You can leave it as it was, then nothing happens, nothing changes compared to what you are used to. But you can also choose to see the buffer in total or the buffer level, which in the end I tend to have as my preference setting. Okay, so this was all about the extended functionality in the job view. So then let's go for the task connections. So what is task connections all about? So task connections, give you as a user the functionality to connect two tasks strictly with each other. So that's not very astonishing, right? So that is like literally connecting two tasks. And when you have connected two tasks, then the just planet scheduling engine, our automatic finite scheduling algorithm, always ensures that there is never any waiting time between two connected operations. And no waiting time implies that there will never be scheduled any other task of a higher prioritized or even lower prioritized jobs in between two connected tasks. So it ensures, the connection ensures that the two connected tasks, always stick together. Okay? So having this in mind, please note that connecting task, it requires linear task structures. So the connected operations need to be in a strictly linear predecessor-successor relationship, which implies that every task can just be connected to one other task. So if you remember my example of job to explain the KPIs to you, that assembly job in the end, you could not connect the two predecessor operations to that, as that wouldn't be linear. But you could connect one of them. So one task can be connected with one other, which implies that you can connect linear task structures. Does that make sense? So in addition, what we do consider always, as a matter of fact, is the working time, so the working calendars of your finite capacity. So the work calendar, is defined by the standard availability plus all exceptions, and this calendar is also considered. When you have two tasks connected, then the connection is shown on the predecessor line by that connection icon, and it's shown on the connected bar itself at the left side, as well as you can see it in the symbol column of the Gantt chart views. But we will have a detailed look into that. Let's first have three examples of how the task connection works. So like here in use case A1, I've connected task A and B. And if you see the link, so the arrow from task A to B that shows up in a 90-degree angle, this implies that there is no delay at all. So like there is, the scheduled end date of task A is exactly the same as B. So that is absolutely a desired case of task connection. So here the scheduling engine ensures that this, is always connected. However, use case A2 also shows a desired use case and a connected case of A and B, as there might also be the case that there is exactly a time window of non-productive time, between A and B. And so this also shows a desired case, even though the scheduled start date of B is not exactly the same as B, but it is ensured that in between that time window, it's just unproductive time and never another operation of another job. Never. So both green cases here show desired cases, while use case B here shows like a time gap between A and B that is not caused by a calendar. And as we have the job view simulated here, it must be that another operation was scheduled in between. And that will never happen if you connect two tasks. Okay? So then, last but not least, before we switch to the Just Planet app, let's have a look into the most common use case. And the most common use case for sure is that you have a starting setup of a machine where you would need an operator that has a skill to do the setup, plus obviously the machine that must be set up. And afterwards, the operator can leave the place and the machine can run the process independently after setup, right? So here we have got actually two tasks with different resource requirements, because the first task, the setup, needs two resources, operator and machine, while the second task just needs a machine. So what we do in Just Planet, and actually what we did before, we split that into two separated tasks. So that is as it was before. Yeah, so like we have got one task for the setup and one task for the actual production process. But now what we do is we do both. We do a task constraint on the machine, which we did before too, right? So like that ensured that the scheduling engine always takes the same machine for the process that was foreseen for the setup. But now additionally, what we do is we also define a task connection between setup and process that ensures that these tasks are linked together and that I don't have the use case that any other operation is squeezed in between, which in reality just makes no sense. Okay, so this is all about the theory. Now let's have a look into the application. And therefore I'm going back into my data set here. And let's have a look into that job PO6. And here you can see that exactly that use case that I explained refers to the two starting operations. And I'm further zooming in here. And you can see that I have a laser cutting setup, which obviously is done by worker 5 on laser cutter 2. And afterwards, the laser cutter 2 can run independently. And this here is connected, and you can see that by the connection icon at the left of the bar. And we have got also a machine constraint that ensures that I take the same machine, and this icon is on the right of the bar. Both icons show up here at the very left in our icons or symbol column. If I'm just having a look into the dialog itself, so then you can see all information that you are pretty familiar with, but we have added now an additional column that is called task connection number. And here, with referring to T10, I have linked these or connected these two operations so that they behave as I explained to you on the previous slides. So that is what the magic is all about. Connecting to ensure that nothing else is squeezed in between. Sounds very trivial, but has a very significant impact and a lot of benefit, as this use case, of setup and process with different resources is a use case that pretty much occurs with almost every customer of Just Planet. Don't forget to set also the task constraint on the machines. So here you can see also the T10 goes into the task constraint, but that is functionality that you guys are aware of already, and that is nothing that we just published with the latest release. It's all about the connection. Okay, so then let me show another example or maybe first I'm going to my resource categories views. So here I made use of the categories and don't have the skills of the operators, just to have a more bundled and more performant view. But what I actually want to show to you is, if I'm zooming in here, so then you can see the setup and the process is just right next to each other. And these connection, there will never be any operation scheduled in between. It will be always one after the next. And maybe there is a time gap, but that time gap would just be due to a non-productive time, and that the setup exactly would be to schedule at the beginning of the non-productive time. That's the only exception when having a time gap, but never any operation in between here. Okay, then let's have another job, and here I have created the full routing with task connections. Let me see. So like that is PO8 here. And PO8 shows, as you can see on the very left here, all icons with connecting icons. That shows that the entire routing is strictly scheduled one after the next. Even though this has a pretty low priority, it's always ensured that it's one after the next. And even if you would bring in like time constraint, then the connection is always automatically considered. So like, let's make an example. Due to what reason ever, I get a time constraint for the laser cutting. So then it always reschedules these connections here. And now you see, now I've got this example that the setup has a slight delay with the process, but still that is just because of the non-productive times, and there is 100% no operation scheduled in between. So like, there will be no other task in between. It's just because of the non-productive time. If you would have a 24/7 work shift, so it would always 100% stick together. Also, if you have got time constraints somewhere in the middle, it will calculate for the entire job. See, so now same scenario again. There's no waiting time, even if you have a constraint right in the middle. It will always take care of all links of the entire job. Okay. So then, last but not least, I just want to point out that you, of course, can also upload task connection. And therefore, we have got extended our uploading functionality as well as the API. And here we have just added one column that says task connection task number. And with adding a column and naming it as such, you will also be able to create your data via the Excel upload. And here, of course, both in the job templates, in the component templates, as well as in the task tab. Okay, so that is the task connection functionality. I hope that I could give you a helpful overview over both, the idea, the definition, the most common use case, and how to create your data accordingly. In my eyes, this is not complex, very easy to handle and to create the data, but the outcome is really powerful. And therefore, I highly recommend that if you have such use cases that I explained to you within your operations, then adjust your data accordingly, especially if you're using master data, do it like this. If not, then minimum, if creating new jobs, make use of that functionality, as it for sure shows up with additional benefit for your high mix, low volume scheduling. Okay. And in this regard, I thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. If you have got any questions, ideas, or whatever, just please feel free to reach out on every channel that we offer. We will provide an answer and I can guarantee that every idea, every request, or whatever is heard and is internally discussed. And with that, I thank you for today. Hope to talk to you soon. Have a great day, and bye-bye.